Hi Claire, how are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. I'm really excited to speak with you. So I'm Sohaila with Temple of Geek, and I wanted to start off by saying congratulations on another Emmy nomination
Thank
amongst so many other nominations that you've got, including like Oscars and BAFTA and Critics' Choice. How does it feel to get this nomination specifically for this show being so like meta and looking at the behind the scenes of this industry?
So, anytime you start a show, you just never know where it's going to go. I mean, I had no doubt in my mind the show was going to be amazing, just from the group of people that I was working with. But the way it's been received is amazing, and I'm
Mhm.
so proud of my team and I'm so proud of the work we did. And, you just always hope that you are involved in a project when all the worlds come together, the
Yeah.
cinematography, the wardrobe, the production design. And, this I think is a perfect example of that happening on this show.
That's awesome. So let's dig into like Continental Studios because that's obviously the big one. A lot of episodes are shot inside of the actual like building itself and the studio lot. And there's like the vibes of the building itself was very like retro, Art Deco, Spanish Revival. So what was it like putting together all of like the decorative pieces and all of like the furniture and textiles, even like the sconces? I was like looking at all the different details of just everything coming together, and it has such a like a great aesthetic, and it's very well put together, and like very much like everything's like feels so seamless, as well as having like the newer technology sort of like contrasting that. So could you talk a little bit about putting all of that together and creating Continental Studios as we see it?
Absolutely. So, it was really interesting when met with Julie and we talked about this office building she was designing. My first thought was, oh, wow, how in the world am I going to find furniture? And not only furniture that aesthetically is correct, but in multiples. So I knew pretty instantly that we were going to have to manufacture almost everything for that office.
Wow.
So, I dug through and figured out the pieces that we could sort of say had been maybe introduced along the way, maybe in the upholstery and things. And then Julie and I talked a lot about what would be built-ins as far as sofas and pieces. And then, I just really wanted to have this clear line sort of through all the pieces. So the idea was, it's this studio leftover from the 30s. It had its heyday. It's hanging on. It's had maybe a few upgrades. But, Julie and I had talked about, there's something really amazing about having, an Apple computer on a Frank Lloyd Wright desk. And so, I just sort of chipped away and figured out the pieces. So we built coffee tables and side tables. We built Matt's desk, his
Mhm.
very heavy desk that
Yeah.
my man will never forgive me for. Uh, and, we designed the conference tables and we decided to incorporate her block design into the wood design of the tables. And, it was such a large cavernous space. Something that was really important to me was I felt like we didn't necessarily need a lot of pieces. We just needed the right pieces and we needed the scale to be correct. From the sconces to the furniture to the artwork, even, I
Mhm.
was just felt like we needed these big, bold strokes to make that space work. And yeah, I'm really happy with the way it turned out.
It came together really well. And I do want to talk about Matt's office in particular, because we do see his personality into it. And so I wanted to ask you, like, what elements did you put in there to kind of reflect him, either in the furniture pieces or even like in the books, even like the details that we may not have actually like seen on screen, like some of the like I couldn't really get any of the book titles, but I'm
Right.
assuming that those are very, those were selected for him in particular.
you know, he's such an interesting character because in his heart, he loves movies.
Mhm.
And so we really tried to get that across with some of the dressing, his uh, the old director's chair, the leather director's
Mhm.
chair, that would have been something he would have bought on eBay because maybe it belonged to a famous director that he admired from the
Mhm.
past. We tried to get some of his movies in there through posters and, just that he has this archive that he spends his life studying movies and wants to know everything about every movie that's ever been made.
Mhm.
So old cameras, we wanted him to be into music, so he had a record player in there.
Mhm.
And then we just also put some of the maybe old pieces. There's a great rendering of the exterior of Continental Studios
Mhm.
that we wanted, would have been something he would have kept from the past. Awards, bits and bobs. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
it was
And
a
what
fun set to do.
Yeah, oh, I can imagine. And there's also Matt, but then there's also all the other characters, and each of them having their own spaces and their desks. How did you go about furnishing all those individual spaces and having them be reflective of each character?
So we just, we really like you look at Sal and he's,
Mhm.
he's a bit of a guy. So, we just tried to play up, he's really into sports.
Mhm.
He probably does, betting on the side, whatever. So we just tried to make him, certainly not as cool as Matt, but loves his job and has been with the studio actually for a while. So
Mhm.
tried to give him cigars, decanters, things like that that sort of, reflect his personality. And then, Quinn is so interesting because
Mhm.
she's young and we, wanted to give her just kind of this little nest for her to be in with all of her scripts, all of her stuff. She's really in, we talked about her really being into artwork and finding these great pieces from Mary Kornowski Gallery.
Mhm.
So we just tried to really, give each space its own personality and really sort of reflect who these people are. But at the end of the day, they all want to be there and they all love movies. So we really tried to get that across.
That's awesome. I loved it. I like tried to look at all the different things on each of their desks,
No,
but there's
it's
just so much going on.
For me, it's, I've done very stark sets and I've done, hoarder sets, but for me, it really is in the details. I
Mhm.
think anybody can pick a beautiful desk. It's really like what you put on that desk, whether it's 3 objects or 30 objects. It's really,
Yeah.
for me, in the details, trying to get across to the audience, I'm telling a story about who these people are, and I want that story to come across very quickly for the audience. So hopefully
Yeah.
we did.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's also a story to be told about Continental Studios as a studio space as well, with the furnishings, like you said, in the conference room with the table, the little motif there, the artwork that's also in that room and a couple others, and the big huge mural with like the big C logo kind of shining down. Could you talk about a little bit more about those pieces, like the artwork that we see throughout that, like, with the movie posters, and I think there's one shot that looks like the Vertigo movie poster in a big artwork piece. Could you talk a little bit about those ones?
So I actually worked with my own graphics person, Kevin Kalaba, and so we went to the writers and they gave us a list of titles, and we decided what titles fit best from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and really wanted to design these posters through the decades.
Mhm.
And we looked at many artists, many different movie posters. And Kevin and I just really sort of worked off these titles, and he did this wonderful job of making up these fake movie posters for me.
Mhm.
I had found that staircase Vertigo picture in Matt's office, and we showed it to Seth, and he said, "It's great. Can we put a dead body on it?" And I was like, "Absolutely, amazing. I love it. Let's do it."
Yeah.
And I really can't take credit for the big mural. That's something that Julie worked on really hard with another graphic designer. We had a very short load in for that project. I
Mhm.
had 6 weeks from beginning to the first day of shooting, which of course had to be Continental Studios. So
Course.
there was no buffer. There was no like, we've got to get this done. So, and I really want to tell people that I don't think I could have pulled this job off it was amazing being at a studio with all these amazing craftspeople. I had the wood shop going at Warner Brothers. I had the metal shop. I had drapery. I had upholstery. I had the prop house with other vendors around Los Angeles. So I cannot
Mhm.
speak highly enough about why we have the best craftspeople in the world in Los Angeles. And they were really the reason that I was able to make this happen in the window that we had because it was tight, but you know,
Yeah.
did
No,
it. So
no, it's incredible. And like given all of like the different well, I'm gonna jump down into a later topic that I was gonna bring in a little later, but since you brought it up as well, like all the different craftspeople that you had to bring in and all the different aesthetics, all the different movies, all the different sets, all the different like changing, like on the studio lot, I was looking at the backgrounds as the characters were walking around and there's all of these different like props and set pieces and things that look like it's like, halfway through putting together, an entire set for a part of like the movie and like the Chinatown. There's so much going on. How did you manage all of that?
we were lucky enough to have scripts from them, so that is always incredibly helpful, especially when you're working under these tight deadlines.
Mhm.
And I've worked at Warner Brothers a lot, and I knew the backlot very well. So it was really amazing to sort of get these scripts and
Mhm.
then talk about doing these movies within the show and how elaborate they were going to be or how small they were going to be. And then that coupled with, all these golf cart tours through the lot, you always laugh when you see, I think I go back to like Wee Herman's Great Adventure and you see the backlot with the showgirls and the this. And so it was kind of a throwback to that, but it was also, I've also wanted it to be look real, like this
Mhm.
is, but all those pieces are dressed to be specific. Like we would talk about, well, they're going to do this tour and we're going to have, the Spartacus movie going on and the vampire movie. So, and then that coupled with the Ron Howard film that we did on
Mhm.
the 1970s, all of them, even the little zombie apocalypse, you're just taking these basically barren streets and you're turning them into a movie set. So it was a lot of fun. And the crew were all game and the grips let me roll in their grip carts and you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it was really a group effort by everyone.
That's amazing. And I don't know if this would even make sense, but did you borrow almost any like prop pieces from other movies that were shooting at the same time that they no longer needed? Or was
Uh,
all of that created just for the show here?
no, every single one of those vignettes was created from scratch from us.
Amazing.
We originally had tried to do Chinatown on a smaller street at Warner Brothers, and
Mhm.
unfortunately, it was not available to us. And I was like, "Wow, this is this
Oh,
street is massive." But
yeah.
it was sort of like bringing everything in and bringing all the lights and all the flags in, and sort of creating this thing. And then, I'd gone to Chinatown to do some research and
Hmm.
take some photos. And I came back to Julie and I said, I just think it's so important for us to build the arch. I think it's just, it's the piece. And, we did it really smartly and it wasn't a huge cost to us. And we knew that most of it would be seen at night and it was really
Hmm.
about the lighting. So, and, always, it's such a big part of my job now, working with the lighting department and the DP. And I can't speak highly enough about either one of those departments because they were amazing and they really, really gave, it was so interesting for me because I'm not on set a lot of time when they shoot. So
Hmm.
seeing all these behind the scenes camera moves that they were doing, I mean, my mind is blown.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. And the Chinatown is one of like my favorite sequences to watch. Just like the tonal shift in that scene and then actually getting to see all the details and it looked incredible. All of like the details
Oh,
that went into
brother, that was really fun.
Yep. Yeah, really, really beautifully done. And like every single set was like that. And it just like it's one thing to create like sets that are going to be reused throughout an entire show. And then it's another thing to create a set that's almost like ephemeral that's going to be used for maybe one episode, maybe even like a quick scene. Like in the very first episode, we just get that first shot and then we don't see.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think the Golden Globes is a perfect example of that.
Yep.
With
Yeah.
our 24-hour load in. So, and
Wow.
it's great sometimes when you're under pressure like that because you are just, it's like a well-oiled machine, and I knew every single piece that was going in there. So we built everything off-site, and it basically just came together like a puzzle.
Ah,
All the palm fronds, all the floral arrangements, they were really just done in big sections that were able to be trucked there and then come off the truck and then be put together like a puzzle. So it was
ah.
another one. And I have a great florist and great greens people that I work with that really do some amazing work.
That's awesome. And again, like you were saying, because the shots are so not what's the word? Not kinetic. Because they like move around through the set, everything has to be like from all angles as well. How do you manage that? Because and even some of the sets that are like showing the behind the scenes, obviously that's still a set. Right? Like you're creating the behind the scenes as a set. How did you go about doing that? And were there any sort of like blurring between the actual set that you built and the real behind the scenes set at all?
So, it was interesting because I knew pretty instantly that's the world we were going to be in, that everything was fair game, that,
Hmm.
there was no looking one direction. So
Hmm.
you do take that into consideration when you're building out sets, even at the Wilshire Bell and knowing they're going to walk through that whole courtyard. So we go on these scouts and they're always very quick, because everyone's got a lot to do. So it's just, they were very communicative though, and Seth and Evan really had a vision of how they wanted to walk through these spaces, which is hugely helpful to every other department. It doesn't mean that we had to dress less necessarily,
Hmm.
but we really knew kind of what was important, where the actors were going to stop, where the camera was going to be, what angles were most important to us. So it was just so great to work with them because they really had a vision for this show and they really knew what they wanted. I think The Oneer is a perfect example. It was constantly evolving, but we really knew the path, the rooms, where they were going to go, where they were going to stop. Even at Patty's house, I knew what was going to be important to showcase in that house. So that's always really helpful.
Yeah, so let's talk about the oneer because that's just like one of the episodes that blew my mind. And I mean, the oneer is a oneer.
Yes.
Maybe with a little bit of movie magic in there. But what was it like building out that entire set and knowing kind of like, having that sequence where they're walking through and everything having to be, set at like live as they're moving through and then set and reset and as they're doing different takes and things like that. Could you talk more about that process?
So, again, sort of what I was saying, we had a good idea, but it was, dressing out the bedroom as the wardrobe room. That's all of us. That's all
Hmm.
the makeup tables, the wardrobe racks. It's working really closely with my great prop master. So, what the food is, what the drinks are, where I need to have stuff displayed or dressed out for him. So again, we sort of were able to create that environment uh, with my stuff, but then also with the real camera stuff. That was kind of a perfect example where everything was fair game. So all the director's chairs, all the monitor, that's all real. So
Hmm.
it was nice for once to sort of be able to show everything,
Hmm.
and use all that stuff. And that house was so, I mean, we got to just shoot in some of the most beautiful locations and some of my favorite houses around Los Angeles, and that Silvertop house is certainly one of them.
Hmm.
So again, just trying to showcase it, trying to dress it out, trying to make it believable for this movie script that we're shooting, and just working really closely with all the other departments and how we're going to pull this off. So
That's awesome. I love that we got to see like the real behind the scenes part of that. I wasn't sure, but I'm glad that you mentioned that as well because that's one of those things with like actually showing like the behind the scenes and on screen. I'm always like wondering, okay, like is I know there's like a set built, but where is, the
well, the
sort
lines
of the
were
edges of
definitely
it? Yeah.
blurred because, like I said, created that wardrobe room, and we created all the makeup tables, and we created the craft service area, and we
Mhm.
created, so some of it is real and then some of it is us. So it was fun to sort of blur those lines, and
Mm.
nobody really could tell what was us and what was them. So that's all you can hope for, is
Yeah.
having the audience believe that this is a real film set.
Yeah, no, it was a great episode and like just fantastic, like all around. Was there a particular set that was more challenging than the rest, either in terms of like how they were going to shoot it or in terms of like the technical aspect of creating the pieces?
Interesting question. I think the only challenge, maybe other than the Golden Globes, just because of our short load in,
Yeah.
some of the locations like Matt's house, they're not easily accessible.
Mm,
Um, and Matt's house in footprint is actually quite small. We ended up taking almost everything out of that house. So all that dressing is basically stuff that we brought in because, we are a big footprint when you're a shooting crew, and especially the way they were shooting all the episodes. I tried to be really smart about how much stuff I put in there and how easy they would be able to move around. You
mm,
really sort of took that into consideration when you were thinking about all the pieces that you could fit in that house. Again, one of my favorite Lautner houses, but it's each location has its challenges. I am always a big fan of building sets because I can put a sconce anywhere I want and I can put a nail in the wall. You know what I mean? So any location comes along, and especially when you're working in these sort of amazing historic homes. So you have to be very cognizant of what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And we do get to see a few different homes, Matt's being one, but we also get to see Patty, we get to see Quinn. What was it like kind of bringing the personalities that you built in Continental Studios into their home life? And actually, like, which one came first?
So we actually did Patty's house first.
Nice.
And, she's actually one of my favorite characters on the show.
Mhm.
And we just, it always goes back to this thing where I sit down with Julie and we sort of come up with a color palette for her. And then we talk to wardrobe about that. And then, of course, Seth has opinions about that. Or it might work the other way. Like, we really knew sort of the color palette of Matt's wardrobe. So I tried to work backwards from that.
Mhm.
And again, when we talked about Matt's house, for instance, we decided Matt is hardly ever there. There isn't a lot of personality in the house, and there isn't a lot of mess in the house because he's basically at work all the time.
Mhm.
And so, and then Quinn's house, again, this idea that she's this young, up and coming and cool and hip and, has her finger on the pulse of a lot of great stuff going on, whether through literature, or music, or art, or whatever. So again, I try to keep that into their homes. We never see Patty's office, but I did try to give her just this beautiful, soft palette, um, wonderful house. So,
Nice. And you
yeah.
mentioned Seth having input quite a bit in some of this process. How involved was he in, the hands-on as well as just like kind of helping set the scene for what the aesthetic was going to be like for the different sets and the different pieces that you were working on?
So I love to do the research, and I love to put boards together, and I do everything in trays, which when I originally presented even Continental Studio to Seth, Evan, and all the writers, I remember one of them looking at me and saying, "Oh, thank you so much for having all this. Like, we can pick up, touch, and not doing this on an iPad." And I was like, "Who does this on an iPad?" It's so important, this is like my big reveal. So, I don't know if, I work an older style way than maybe some of the younger people coming up, but I just think, I'm a totally visual person, and everything I do is visual. So I am love to lay everything out. So basically for each big set, I would design a board, a lookbook. We digitize everything as well. But Seth would always take the time to sort of walk through, look at where we're going, and have opinions, but also be super appreciative of what we were doing. And so that just makes for such a wonderful environment. And anytime he laughs, all is well in the world.
That's awesome.
Yes.
I love that you mentioned like the trays and having like the actual physical like pieces there for people to see because I think that's something that's like really underappreciated these days with everything kind of going digital and there's instances where they probably could have gone into CGI, but then, they decided to actually like make a physical set. And I love practical effects and I love seeing like the physical objects in the space as well. So it's really
I think
nice. Mhm.
it's a really great way. I would get a sample of the green tile floor from Julie, and we would talk about the wood tone that would be in all of her built-ins, as well as maybe the finish on all of my furniture. And I think it really all laid out together gives you a sense. And for me, that's really like a most creative and collaborative moment I can have with a designer is seeing all of our stuff working together and coming
Mhm.
together. And I think it really helps, directors, anybody, DPs Adam was there. So I think it really gives them a sense because looking at a floor plan,
Mhm.
and looking at stuff necessarily sometimes on a computer, it's not even the real color. So I think it's just a great way to work and display your finishes.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love it. Was there ever a time where there was like, differing opinions, whether between you and Julie or Seth or, anybody on the team, and kind of how did you work through that?
I mean, really, honestly, nothing comes to mind. I mean,
That's awesome.
I I had known of Julie and I had met Julie. We had just never really gotten the opportunity to work together before. So this was actually our first project together. And, I can't say enough, all the love in the world because this is all you look for as a decorator is finding a partner, a collaborative partner and a designer.
Mhm.
And it's so great when it's right. So I absolutely loved working with her. We just finished a movie together and
Nice.
yeah, back to hopefully season two of the studio in October. So
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait for season two. I know like season one just barely it just came, a couple of months ago, but it was such a great show. Um, awesome. And so we've talked about the Golden Globes. There's also CinemaCon, the latter two episodes. Can you talk about that? Because there's so many different like I guess locations. Like there's, the party room that they have, there's the actual like stage. There's also like the side quest that oh shoot, I'm forgetting his name. Bryan Cranston's character, that side quest that he goes on.
yeah, the last two episodes.
Yeah. Can you talk about the last two episodes? Because there's so much. And again, like the posters you mentioned, the graphic artist that you were working with. I'm really excited, but all the posters and the fact that they were all kind of custom made. And like as soon as I saw them walking by them, I paused to look at each one. I
So
love that.
those big posters were actually done with Julie and
Okay.
her graphics person. I did all the posters in the actual Continental
Awesome.
Studio and in the offices and stuff. So those posters, we dragged those light boxes around everywhere. And it's just again, it was for me and I think for Julie talking about scale and what
Mhm.
is, going to be a quick read. So we came up with the light box idea. And I think it's just such a great graphic to have them be walking by. And it really kind of tells the whole story of the whole season of the
Mhm.
show. Working in Vegas, interesting.
Yep.
Living and working at the Venetian, interesting.
Mhm.
But it was great. And so that whole it was just again sort of landing there, doing a scout with them and figuring out where they wanted their camera angles to be and, dressing out those bits as quickly as we could. So
Mhm.
it was uh that was CinemaCon and then Comic-Con
Mhm.
was one of the last things we shot and it was we did it on a stage at Warner Brothers and Julie came up with that amazing graphic and it
Nice.
it works, yeah.
Oh, that's
The cast
awesome.
of characters, that I would see coming through amazing. So
Mhm.
when I first I'd known Jesse Sternbaum, the UPM, and he called me and he said, I'm doing this show and I know you want to do movies, but uh I gotta send you these scripts. And I literally got Kool-Aid in the first script, and I was like, I'm in. I'm done. That's it. You got me.
Awesome.
Before I even know this amazing set that Julie was building, but I was already like instantly in.
That's awesome. It must have been a treat to get to work on so many diverse sets that are so tonally different as opposed to having something and still having like a unique or a cohesive feel throughout the entire season. That was one of the things that I was really impressed with is even though each individual sort of like movie and each individual even location was kind of had this unique aesthetic. There was still this very like this thread throughout all of it, which I found really impressive and I really enjoyed. Um, was there anything that you like would take into account when you were creating these individual sets that you would try to kind of link back to the general aesthetic of the show, or were each of those completely separate?
I would really honestly say that each one is really kind of its own standalone piece.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, again, it's not so much me trying to give it a style as me trying to make it believable. Like
Hmm.
I really wanted you to believe you were in this, 1970s rundown New York or
Hmm.
you're wherever. So it's really for me just building out this world as its own unique piece.
Hmm.
But it's nice whether it's because the way it was filmed or because the way it's lit that, there's this sort of, yes, thorough, that it all works together for sure.
Nice. And it was very believable. Like I could like see like those individual movies potentially being made and actually just being released, which was really cool.
It's the biggest compliment when
Mhm.
people come to you and they're like, "But I don't understand. Where is that building?" And I'm
Where?
like, "Building is on stage 23. It is not a real building."
Mhm.
They just some people are like, "I don't understand." And
I
then the other compliment is, "Can we please make this movie?" So that's
yes.
like,
I honestly thought Continental Studios was a real building until I started doing my research for this interview and I was like, wait a minute. It's not real. Like I knew like at least like studio lot that could be, built up, but I was like,
they're like, "I
what do
don't
you mean
understand. That's
Continental
not where the
Studios is not
Hollywood
real?
sign is."
Exactly. What do you mean? And the other, oh, sorry, go
Yes.
ahead.
No, it was just funny because I'm like, people just really can't wrap their heads around it sometimes. And then, they did, Julie built that wonderful exterior at Warner Brothers in front of the TV building. And they did some amazing set extensions on that. And I remember watching that sweeping, uh, shot comes out of the building and goes across the lot. And I was like, wow, this
Mhm.
is, yeah, beautiful, beautiful work by all.
Yeah. And the other cool thing with the studio is all of the different guest appearances that made it, all the different celebrities that came in, all the different directors, which was really, really cool. How did you manage all of that? Like having all the different like celebrity appearances and then having like, for example, with the sorry, what was it called? Alphabet City. So like with Alphabet City, having like, the individual like characters within that also having their own like aesthetic in the movie because you have the main cast you know who they are and then you get like sort of these like little one-offs of a celebrity or a guest appearance that's just coming in for like sometimes a few seconds like Charlize Theron and sometimes a lot longer like with Dave Franco. So it was it like having those guests coming in and having them be part of the story either briefly or longer term and creating those visual like connections to them in the story as well.
It was just sort of having the environment that they were going to be in. I don't work very closely with actors most of the
Hmm.
time. So again, it's me working closely with the prop master and making sure, like for the buffet in Las Vegas, that we have interesting serving platters and dishes, and we talked about the glassware, and we talk about any time they're eating. There was the cart that Seth trips over when Ron Howard throws his hat at him. It's just working. It's more working closely with my prop department and talking through these action stunts that they're going to do. Like Sal Saperstein standing on the table at the Golden Globes. It's like, I gotta get a table, we gotta make sure it's safe for him. And so it's working again with other departments with the stunts or props or whoever. So
Awesome. We are at the 30-minute mark. I have a couple like fun questions, but we don't have to get to them if that's all the time that you have today. But
no, I'm good. Yeah.
yeah, awesome. Yay. Okay. What's so again, there's so many different like pieces. I can only imagine, putting all that together. Was there any sort of like hidden Easter eggs that you put in there that either like you didn't get a chance to talk about previously, or even like that's something that the audiences would not have noticed that you would like to shine a light on?
Um, Nothing is coming to mind. I think
Didn't
we
like sneak your name in somewhere or
no, there's a lot of time. I mean, in all honesty, there's a lot of times I'll use family photos for background pictures, might be my kids or my dog or
Mhm.
so sometimes things like that. For myself usually.
Yeah. Any Easter eggs in terms of like nods to different movies? Because again, we talked about Vertigo, and I know there's in Chinatown, and there's so many other movies that you could tell were inspirations here. Are there any Easter eggs there? Like anything that you wanted to like highlight there as well?
Well, interesting enough, now that I think about it, unfortunately, I'm not sure that you ever saw it that much, but in Continental Studios in the lobby, we had the display cases with all of the Emmys and we had the display cases with all of the Oscars, but we actually did this whole display case wall where it was all these little vignettes of past movies. So,
Oh,
yeah, hopefully maybe we'll see it in season two a bit more, but I actually had done a vignette. It was I had my dad's Navy hat in there for a movie.
oh,
So little things like that. It's fun. I had my old writing helmet for like, blue velvet, you know what I mean? So
nice,
uh yeah, so we created all these little vignettes within this display case. And
nice.
so yeah, you like to bring in those personal touches for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I hope we get to see like a close, even if it's like the background of two characters
Right?
speaking, because that's what I keep doing is like as two characters are speaking and sort of like being stationary for a little bit, I start looking at the background and and seeing all the cool little things that are in there. Was there a particular ongoing prop or set element that was like throughout various episodes that you kind of carried through?
No, because I think all the, no, not really, because each set really had its own sort of look or style
Hmm.
or so you know, yes, I tried to keep each set really its own individual style. I can't
Okay.
really think of anything that went all the way through.
All right. Did you have a particular piece, either, a set or an individual piece that you created that's your favorite, either because it was like technically something that was really challenging to work on, or because it's just cool.
So probably Matt's desk. But
Nice.
I worked with a friend of mine, Adam, and he hand drew all the furniture. So it was really, and then we have to get all of it cleared because it can't be, an exact match.
Hmm.
So I think working through that process and getting to manufacture so much furniture, um, as a decorator, that's such a joy because you don't get that opportunity a lot. I've reupholstered a lot of things but actually getting to design stuff and picking the wood and the finishes and doing the design and working through the design with Adam was really that for me was one of the greatest moments for me.
Nice.
That particular show, yeah.
Nice. Was the meeting table in Remic's office also custom made? Because the back of those chairs was just so cool and a silhouette I've never seen before.
We made those as well. We made
Figure.
that. Yeah. So
Nice.
yeah, all those pieces in his office, almost all of them we manufactured, except for
Even the
some.
little I was gonna say even the little like pencil holders because those were like very Continental Studios-esque,
No,
like
that's
with the
like
cutouts.
that's out shopping. I mean, I am boots on the ground out shopping, and I always tell people, I've always been that way because sometimes I get my best ideas by walking into a store and seeing something that I wasn't even thinking about, or
Mhm.
walking into a prop house and finding a chair, and then the whole set kind of comes together around that chair. So I'm a real believer of being out and shopping and looking at pieces and not just sitting at a computer.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's one of the things like when I get like stuck creatively, I just like go outside and just walk, even like just it with no expectations. You just start like, getting inspiration from the most random things. It's awesome.
Exactly.
And then for season two, have you started on anything there? Is there anything you can, you know, talk about at all?
Afraid not. I know nothing. I have
Okay.
not seen any scripts yet. I don't know yet. So I'm as excited as everyone else to see where we're going.
Is there
Absolutely.
anything, is there anything you're hoping to do that you didn't get a chance to do in season one?
I don't know. No, I'm just really excited to see what they come up with. I did see an interview with Seth, and I think he said they were so nervous on season one, reaching out to people and not knowing how if people were going to want to come and do this. And he said now is basically his phone's ringing off the hook, and everybody wants to see the show. So
Yeah.
I'm like, yay!
Nice. Nice.
Yes,
Wow. I can't even imagine like who it was it you mean like for guest appearances
yes,
or
yeah,
yeah. I can
yeah.
even imagine
I
like
know.
you've
I'm
got
like
some great like Martin Scorsese. Come
unbelievable. Yeah,
on.
love it.
Oh,
I love
but
that he's been nominated for an Emmy for the
yeah.
first time.
His reaction to that was, how did you see the
I did.
post?
I loved it. So
Oh,
good.
perfect reaction to that. Awesome. I've got one last fun question. I don't even know if you're allowed to do this, but is there anything that you were allowed to keep from set?
No, because I knew we were coming back.
Oh, awesome. And hopefully many more seasons. This show is really cool. And I loved like even somebody who's, I mean, I don't work in the industry on like the creative side, but I love seeing kind of the behind the scenes and I have some idea of it. But even then, like I learned so much from the show and I can't wait to see what else they address because they addressed like so many different topics that are so important. And I just, yeah, season two, I can't wait.
Well, amazing. I'm thrilled how well it's been received. So,
Awesome.
and 3 nominations. Woo!
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Like very well deserved. Very well deserved. Is
Yeah.
there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to talk about? Anything that like you're excited about? Anything that you never got a chance to speak about that like, you really wanted to shine a light on?
No, I mean, I think really I can't say enough about the craftspeople in Los Angeles. I mean, honestly, it's been a really hard couple of years.
Yeah.
And we're losing prop houses and we're losing resources. And I really hope that people, understand that the film industry really is the backbone of the city.
Hmm.
And I'm excited about the tax incentive and changing the cap and really hope for the best because, you know, it would be such a shame because it really is full of the most amazing craftspeople.
Yeah. That's actually something that we didn't touch on was because the movie would have been, or sorry, the show would have started shooting kind of just post-COVID era. Was there anything that sort of had to change or anything that was sort of like limitations on you with all of that going on?
You mean not the studio necessarily, but coming out of COVID?
Yeah, like changes in the industry in general. I mean, because of
Um,
COVID and all of and the strikes as well. If there was any sort of change that you felt working on this show.
no, I think, we've sort of come out of all that.
Okay.
And it was really thrilling to me that, they were willing to spend the money to build a set like that. And,
Hmm.
um, you know, I don't know where the business is going in the future, but I'm just really glad right here, right now, that I'm still able to work this way. We're building sets like this. I'm getting to
Hmm.
decorate sets like this. And I really think it resonated with the audiences,
Yeah.
and I really hope that that's how we continue because that's what the business has been, and it's what I'm hoping continues to be, I guess.
Yeah.
So with the changes that I know are inevitable. So
Mhm.
we'll see.
Yeah, for sure. There's always change, in
Yes.
an industry like this is ever changing, but at the same time, it's nice to see some of that creativity and the craftspeople like remain and continue to have jobs because like they're so necessary, and especially with like a show like this. And I hope it's a really good example, and also like, prompts other shows and studios to continue making shows like this with just like the reception of this. And yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're at like
Okay.
45 minutes
All right.
almost.
I'll let you go.
I'll
Thank
let you go. I'm
you. so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was lovely to meet you.
Oh, thank you for speaking with me. This has been amazing. I always love talking. Like I always say I'm just nerding out with people behind the scenes. I know it's an interview, but this is just I just love like talking to people who are actually like creating all these like beautiful things behind the scenes that really need like more appreciation. But yeah, thank you so much, Claire. This has been an absolute pleasure.